All right, so if you're just tuning in, we're going through the 5 values that pretty much set up a relationship for failure. And we talked about the first two, one being extreme sensitivity, and the second being judgment.
Yes.
And we talked about lots of different approaches that you can take to address the sensitivity issue. And now on with judgment, like this is when you have that strong desire to hold people accountable. And this is really like the core of cancel culture. You assume the worst in the other person. What are some things that we can do to
Well, I think
be
it
less
should
judgy?
be like more balanced. You can judge, but you also have to control and moderate it. Judgment can help a bit if you're self-critical about yourself. It helps you feel that passion of where you want to go and what goals you want to achieve. But when you have too much of it and it's very imbalanced, then it actually creates a lot more fear and I guess the release of unstored potential that you're not giving to the world or yourself.
Yeah, so there's judgment of yourself. What about judgment of other people? Usually judgment of your partner, which sets it up for failure. If you're in a relationship where you just whenever they make a mistake, you say, oh, that this, you jump to conclusions about who they are as a person. You jump to conclusions about what they're capable or not capable of. What are some things that people can do to reduce that level of judgment? Is it thought process, but also taking more personal responsibility? So when something doesn't go well, some people's inclination is to jump into conclusions and say, oh, it must be the other person. Or if they read a headline and something's wrong in the world, they jump to conclusion, oh, that must be the bad guy.
But it's also like control, right? Judgment is also trying to control the other person. But that is like deferring, like when you're not happy, you just blame it on someone else instead of, as you said, take accountability. And the thing is, everybody has choices in life, right? Choices and decisions. And so you can only be accountable for yourself and choose what you can do. The thing is, if you want other people to follow what your train of thought is, it's more about influencing, right? So how do you influence people to see it your way that is more beneficial instead of saying, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. Like, no one wants to be talked down to or like be, instead, I guess it's more about when you speak, how do you speak? What tone do you use? If it's an antagonizing tone, a nagging tone, those are all negative reflective tones. But if you use like spin in a way where, hey, like, why don't you try it this way? This seems a lot more easier and it saves you a lot more time. So you give, kind of like planting a seed, you give the solution first.
So I would say one way to improve or prevent yourself from jumping to conclusions is to think before you act. And that's always been a motto of mine. And I think it's especially true when you're dealing with like triggering headlines. And a lot of people will just read that headline and then jump to a conclusion, and also be more open-minded. So think before you act and be more open-minded. And what do I mean by open-minded? When you read headlines, a lot of people read news articles from the same source. It's either ABC, CNN, Fox. So when you're reading headlines, it's very easy to jump to conclusions because they're kind of like manipulated to like control your mind. But if you can think before you act and also be open-minded about the sources of what you read so that you get the full picture. A lot of people just read ABC and that's it, or just CNN. And there's a whole, there's politics involved, and each editor, each writer has like their own angle. They use different word choice to get their kind of narrative across. But you as a
So how
citizen,
would you recommend to break that? Because, it's a habit, right? Like, take for instance, I like reading the New York Times, or I'm so used to doing that, or listening to NPR, or like, Fox 5 or whatever it is. Like, how do you break those habits so that you can adjust to open yourself to, I guess, as you said, a wider spectrum or views, whether you agree or disagree with it?
Yeah, I mean, take a look at your phone. Like, what apps do you have downloaded? Is CNN your go-to source for news and nothing else? If you're gonna download CNN, you have to also download something else too, whether it's MSNBC, NBC. They're kind of similar to CNN, but if you want opposing views, look at Fox. Compare the two, right? And so also a lot of times people will read it and then they'll like spread the word before they even like make sense of it. It's like, oh my god, so and so like did this and it's
So
like,
I have a question for you. So since you said you read multiple angles from different news outlets, but the same theme or article kind of take on it, do you see any overlapping, or everything is just very bipolar, like on one side and the other side? Or because it is reporting on the same thing but different views, but do you see anything overlaps or
well, I see distortions of statistics. That's the thing with statistics. Like a lot of it is data, but like they cut off a little like subsegment, and and that little subsegment is what triggers. I guess the latest one was like on abortion, right? And there were statistics about like how like it predominantly affects like lower income people, and they can't cross state lines and stuff like that. So regardless of what your opinion is of abortion, like what they failed to say also was that the vast majority of abortions happening these days is actually from people with above a certain level of income. So when you make the statement that it affects abnormally people who make like under $30,000 a year, well, that's misleading, because there's actually data that shows like the vast majority of people who do the abortions are people who make at least I think it was $45,000 or $50,000. So I don't know the exact details, but that was the kind of like the drift of it. And so if you're a normal person reading that article, you'll just jump to conclusions like, oh my god, this is so bad. It's like it's really affecting the people who are low income to begin with. But if you look at the data, that's actually not what it says.
so it's conflicting, but there's like a little bit over. So basically what essentially you're saying is that it not only affects lower income, but it also affects people of wealth as well too. So in the grand scheme of things, abortion is not just one-sided to a certain demographic, but to all spectrums.
Yeah, and I mean, another example is, Disney had some, they had some participation in politics in the state of Florida, and in question was something called the "Don't Say Gay" bill. The bill never said "Don't say gay." I think it was like it disallowed teachers from teaching kids under third grade about sexuality and gender identity, and people reading the headlines would say, "Oh my God," like the marketing, like they just labeled it "Don't Say Gay" bill, but that's not what it said. So it misleads people and it triggers people to react.
And it blows it out of proportion.
Right. So but if you're astute enough, you would read one article from CNN and you would try to read another article from another source that's on the opposing side. Opposing side, there's not as many sources, but you look at Fox, and then you would form your own conclusion from there. And so what I would encourage people in general to do is to triangulate and think before you act. Especially when that act entails spreading the message even further, because that's just spreading a fire, and that's how this nation has become so divided. And so think before you act, be open-minded, and get your sources of information from multiple sources.
So you're saying get your information from not just yourself or the one immediate to you, but from other people, places, and things around you.
Yeah, yeah.
create a better conclusion or solution for the issues that maybe happen.
Yeah, and don't feel bad about yourself if you're aware that you jump to conclusions. Like, it's okay. We're all humans. I do that myself too.
Yeah.
You've done that yourself too. And
What do you think?
but having that awareness lets you kind of be conscious about, oh, wait a minute, think before you act, and maybe what they said is partially true. Don't like get triggered from that. That's judgment, and I think there are some good nuggets there that people can do to address that second value of cancel culture that's ruining relationships.